Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for a story? One that might actually kind of flip your understanding of, how much people can change. I mean, we're talking completely shifting your worldview, like a total 180.
Yeah, totally.
So today, we're going to dive into the life of Umar Ibn Khattab. Talk about a figure who, and get this, went from wanting to wipe out Islam to becoming like one of its most powerful forces.
Yeah.
Imagine if we had Twitter back then.
Oh, man.
Right. Social media would have exploded.
It would have been wild. What I find really captivating about Umar's story is that, I don't know, it just speaks to this potential we all have for, like, radical transformation, and it makes you wonder, what would make someone with that much strength and conviction actually, like, completely change everything they thought they knew?
Exactly. It's mind-blowing. And to get the full story, we're going to unpack a lecture by Dr. Omar Suleiman. He really brings Umar to life in it. So before we get to Islam, who is this guy? Paint us a picture.
Okay, so picture this. We've got Umar, a physically imposing dude known for being a wrestler, right? But he's not all brawn. This guy is sharp, intelligent, like a skilled poet even. And get this, he was an ambassador for his tribe, the Quraysh. And back then, being able to read and write, that was a huge deal. It was like having a superpower. And Umar had that skill down pat.
Wow. So we're talking a leader, like an influencer of his time. Okay, but he wasn't exactly a fan of the early Muslims, right?
Not initially, no. He actually saw Islam as a threat to the social order of things. Like, he put a lot of value on unity and stability, above all else. And to him, this new faith was like shaking things up, disrupting that balance he valued. It's interesting if you compare him to another big name who opposed the Prophet Muhammad Abu Jahl. Totally different motivations there.
Ooh, okay. I'm intrigued. So what made their opposition so different?
Well, Abu Jahl, he was driven by, pride, I guess, wanting his tribe to stay on top. So for him, it was personal, about keeping power. Umar, though, he genuinely believed he was doing the best thing for his people. Like, he thought Islam would divide everyone, and he was afraid of what would happen then.
Interesting. So almost like he had this sense of responsibility for their well-being, even if he went about it the wrong way.
Exactly. And that concern for doing what he thought was right, you can see it even when he was younger. Umar's dad, he was known for being super harsh, but Umar made a conscious choice to be different, rejected that whole cruelty thing, which really says a lot about him.
Huh. So we've got this complex dude, strong, smart, a leader, genuinely cares about his people. Hard to imagine that he'd end up like one of the most devoted followers of Islam. Makes you wonder, were there any signs before his conversion that this massive shift was even possible? Like anything hinting at it?
There were actually a few incidents that, looking back, it's like Allah was subtly putting Islam right in his path.
Oh, really? Like what, spill the tea?
Okay, so one instance was when his own cousin, Abda, migrated to Abyssinia to escape persecution for becoming Muslim. Dr. Suleiman mentions that Umar felt this, pang of sadness seeing that, like a little crack in his resistance, even if he didn't realize it at the time.
Interesting. Maybe a hint of empathy there. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. Then there's this almost spooky event where he hears this mysterious voice, right, near the Kaaba. And it's warning him about a new movement, one that's going to be super successful. He can't help but see it as, foreshadowing what was going to happen.
Right, like fate whispering to him or something.
Yeah, exactly. But probably the most striking incident, it's when Umar, out of curiosity, ends up hiding under the Kaaba's cloth, and he overhears the Prophet Muhammad reciting the Quran. He's captivated by how beautiful the words are, but he just, can't bring himself to actually accept the message, so he's totally torn.
Pulled in two directions.
Yeah.
He's being confronted with the beauty and power of Islam, but still resisting. It's like he's on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
Unsure whether to step back or just, jump in.
And as we all know, something did eventually push him over that edge.
Right. So what was it? What finally turned this staunch opponent of Islam into one of its biggest champions?
It all kind of started with a family thing. Word got to Umar that his sister, Fatima, and her husband, Saad, had become Muslim.
Oh, wow.
And you got to remember, converting to Islam back then, yeah, that was often met with some serious opposition.
Yeah.
And Umar, he was no different.
I bet he did not take that well.
Oh, you're telling me? He was furious. Stormed right over to Fatima's house, ready to throw down.
Whoa.
Dr. Suleiman describes it as, this super tense moment, right?
Yeah.
Umar, this guy known for his strength, about to clash with his own family over their faith.
Talk about a family drama that changed history. So what happened? What went down?
Things escalated fast. Umar, he was so angry he almost attacked his brother-in-law Saad. But right then, in that crazy moment, Fatima, she showed incredible courage.
I bet.
Stood up to her own brother, defending her faith, even though it was dangerous.
Wow. That must have taken some serious guts.
For real. And the way she spoke, with such conviction, it seemed to, like, cut right through Umar's anger.
Yeah.
And maybe for the first time, he actually considered that, he might be wrong.
So even in that heated moment, a seed of doubt was planted.
Yeah, exactly. And then, get this, Umar, he asks to see the Quran, wants to read the very thing he'd been opposing so hard. And when he reads Surah Taha, this chapter in the Quran that talks about God's oneness and power, it really hit him.
For listeners who might not be familiar, can you give us a little background on what Surah Taha is all about?
Sure thing. So Surah Taha, it's the 20th chapter of the Quran. And it's this really beautiful, powerful revelation that tells the story of Prophet Moses meeting God, emphasizes how important faith is, trusting in God and rejecting those false idols. It also touches on things like creation, resurrection, and ultimately truth winning out in the end.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is. And for Umar, reading this was a turning point. But it wasn't just the Quran alone, Another thing happened that was key. So Khabbab, this companion of the Prophet, he shows up at Fatima's house and drops some news. He tells them that the Prophet Muhammad had been making dua, a heartfelt prayer for Umar to find guidance.
Whoa. Knowing that the Prophet himself was praying for him, that must have really messed with Umar.
Yeah, no doubt. All these things happening, his sister standing up to him, the words of Surah Taha, and then the Prophet's dua, it all kind of came together and clicked for Umar. He saw the truth of Islam.
What a moment. So what did he do then?
What he did next is crazy.
Yeah.
He goes straight to the house where the Prophet Muhammad and his companions are hanging out.
No way.
Can you imagine that scene? This is the guy who was a threat to them.
Yeah.
And now he's just showing up. I bet they were terrified.
You think?
But the Prophet, he stays calm, like always.
Of course.
And when Umar declares his faith, the whole place erupts. Everyone shouting, Allahu Akbar, God is great. And the timing of this, it's wild. Just days after Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, another powerful guy, had become Muslim. And it happened right when Uthman ibn Affan, another prominent companion, returned from Abyssinia, where he'd been hiding from persecution.
So in just a few days, the whole Muslim community is totally transformed.
Oh, yeah. These three, Hamza, the brave one, Uthman, known for his wisdom, and Umar, with all his strength and leadership, they became the foundation of this new Muslim community. And there's this quote from Abdurrahman bin Auf, another companion of the Prophet. He said Umar's conversion was, and I quote, a conquest in itself.
Powerful stuff. Really emphasizes how much things shifted when Umar switched sides.
Absolutely. And with his new faith, Umar totally changes the game in Mecca. No more hiding, no more fear. The Muslims, led by Umar and Hamza, they pray together in public for the first time.
Wow.
Imagine what that was like. A straight up act of defiance. Going from secrecy and fear to that.
Yeah.
Huge. Total 180. And it wasn't just symbolic stuff, Umar confronted anyone who opposed Islam. His physical presence, which used to be scary for the Muslims, now it protected them. He wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in.
So that strength he had, it became a source of power for the Muslims instead of against them.
You got it. And Umar, he's bold, right? So he takes it even further, makes a point of publicly declaring his faith to some of the most powerful dudes in Mecca, even his own uncle, Abu Jahl. What a statement.
Total power move. So we've got this amazing change. Persecutor to protector, opponent to advocate. But what about Umar himself? How did all this affect his personality, his character?
This is where it gets super interesting. Dr. Suleiman points out that Umar didn't just ditch his old traits. He channeled them towards his new faith. His strength, his drive, his passion, all of it now had this higher purpose.
So he didn't suppress those parts of himself, he redirected them.
Exactly. And in the process, he developed new qualities too, like mercy and humility.
It's the ultimate example of personal growth, right?
Totally. And you can see this transformation in his hijrah, the migration to Medina. A lot of Muslims did that quietly, under the radar, but Umar, he went openly, leading a whole group I'm not scared of any of you.
Basically saying, come at me, bro. So what happened when he got to Medina? So there he is, right? Umar's in Medina, a changed man leading a whole community that's energized by his conversion. It's almost like the first act of this historical drama just ended and we're ready for the big finale, So what happens next? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so him arriving in Medina, it's a new chapter, not just for him, but for everyone. He becomes one of the Prophet's closest advisors, right? Super valued for his thoughts on stuff like governing law, social issues. Umar was a key part of building the early Muslim state, like the foundations.
Wow, that's huge. So it wasn't just like his muscles that came in handy. We're talking brains, strategy, the whole package. It
Yeah.
makes me curious, though, how was his leadership different from others back then?
Good question. See, Umar, he had this unique combo of like strength and compassion, known for being firm, upholding justice, but also deeply caring about the people he was in charge of.
That's an interesting mix. Can you give us some examples? Like, how did those two sides play out?
Oh, yeah. There are tons of stories about this. Dr. Suleiman mentions one where Umar's walking through Medina at night and he sees this woman struggling to like start a fire to cook for her kids. He could have just ignored her, right?
Yeah.
But instead, he stops to help, carries firewood, even tends the fire himself.
Wow. That's a leader who, like, gets it. Not just thinking about big political stuff, but the everyday struggles people face.
For sure. And this wasn't like a one-time thing. Umar would regularly walk around among the people, often in disguise, just to hear their worries, see what they needed.
So he didn't just want to rule from, like, some ivory tower. He wanted to be in the mix, experience what they were experiencing.
Exactly. And that's what shaped his policies. He created this whole system of social welfare, made sure the poor and vulnerable were taken care of. Big emphasis on education, too, setting up schools, encouraging everyone to learn, and justice. Oh, man, he was relentless in making sure everyone was treated fairly, no matter who they were.
It's like he was setting the stage for a fair, equal society. All that focus on social welfare, education, justice. That's ahead of its time, even for us.
Yeah, Umar was a visionary in a lot of ways, but it's more than just his accomplishments, you know? He left behind all this wisdom, insights that still inspire Muslims today.
So what are some of the big takeaways? What were his, like, guiding principles?
One that sticks out is accountability, being responsible for yourself and for others, especially if you're in charge. He actually said, and I quote, "If a Muslim dies of hunger, it is as if I have killed him." Strong words, right? Basically saying leaders have to make sure their people are taken care of.
He's not messing around. Leadership isn't about power. It's about service, compassion. That's a big responsibility.
Yeah, no kidding. And Umar lived that way, always working to make things better for everyone. Another big teaching is his focus on knowledge. He said, learn knowledge and teach it to the people, and learn dignity and teach it to the people. It's not just about having info, it's about using it, living honorably.
So relevant even now. Everyone's all about getting knowledge. But what good is it if it doesn't help others or make the world a better place?
Right. And at the end of the day, I think Umar's life shows us how powerful faith can be. His conversion changed everything, not just for him, but for history itself.
Yeah, it really does. It reminds us that faith can push people to do incredible things, and that change, even on a huge scale, is possible.
So as we wrap up our deep dive here, there's this Umar quote that I think sums it all up. He said, "Verily, we were a disgraceful people, and Allah honored us with Islam. If we seek honor from other than Islam, then Allah will disgrace us." It's a reminder that real honor, it's not about what you own or your status. It's about living by your faith with integrity and kindness.
Wow, what a message. It goes beyond any specific time or place. So where do we go from here? What do we take from this whole journey through Umar's life?
I think Dr. Suleiman's lecture and Umar's story, it's all a chance to think about our lives. How can we turn our weaknesses into strengths, use what we know to help others? How can we live honestly and make the world a better, more caring place?
This has been such an inspiring, thought-provoking deep dive. We've gone through the life of this man who was like complicated, full of contradictions, but ultimately so human. Umar Ibn Khattab, his story still has an impact, even centuries later. He teaches us about faith, leadership, and how much people can actually change.
Totally. And anyone who wants to learn more, go check out Dr. Omar Suleiman's lecture. Do some digging, find more sources. There's always so much more to discover, more to learn, more to be inspired by.
Absolutely. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this deep dive, what resonated with you, any insights you got. Share them with us.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, keep diving deep.